you know, make sure that we're carrying brand awareness through to the user experience in the back end, which is something that was severely lacking at most of our campuses prior to merger. We didn't really ever at all interact with marketing, and so we're trying to create a better collaboration environment between us and them, where we can. I mean, they're busy and we're busy, but I'm trying to make sure that that brand comes along with whatever we're building for the students, where possible.
I caught the end of that, and that sounds great. Because that's what we're really trying to do here is make a positive user experience for our students, faculty, and staff. Are you able to see my screen now with the agenda here?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I figured we'd start out with if you just want to show. I know you gave us like a 1,000-foot overview of Yay Bug of your implementation. So if you wouldn't mind, if you're set up, if you could start by maybe showing us what the students see. I don't know if you have a different view, and I don't know if it's easy for you to display the faculty view or not. But that'd be a nice thing to take a look at.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can log in as a test student. I mean, I also am a student, so
Mhm.
so there's a little bit of overlap there, but really I'll start with just what I see, because can you all see that?
Yep.
Because like really the difference in functionality between the different roles is really only governed by what you can see, like everybody's still going to have the same side menus and the same buttons up here and notifications and that kind of thing. The only difference between my environment and what a student sees is the security around what cards I'm allowed to look at. So if I went to Discover as a student, I wouldn't see our entire catalog like I do as an administrator. I would see only the things targeted at students. Um, and those are controlled by the roles. So if I was as an administrator, I can configure our catalog. I can go out and I can look at, I don't know, let's pick like the library, or was it? I don't know. There's university libraries. If I go into edit, you see the configuration for this. But the roles are what I wanted to show here. So it's important to have kind of going into it, it's important to have a defined list of the different types of cohorts that you would be interested in securing this content by. And so what we have here is, some departments, and that'll grow over time. But generally we have like three main categories. Are you faculty, staff, or a student? And then we have, the different campuses so that if we had to drive content by campus, we could. And then, we have some student early access and some faculty early access kind of stuff we can use, like to target certain students for early access to some content we might want them to troubleshoot, or we might want their feedback on. We can target that at specific students. But that's really all that governs the behavior in terms of like what you see out here. The interaction is really all the same otherwise. So if I was a student and I was logging in for the first time, what I would really see is we can try and do that. Let me sign out here.
In your implementation, do you have the widgets locked down so users cannot rearrange them, or are your users able to sort of drag them around to their liking?
Yeah, so you kind of can. Uh the um if you're building a custom card, like you can actually go into the configuration of that custom card and you can kind of gray out this thing up here that says add or remove, but there's also settings that basically say that this thing is sticky.
Mm-hmm.
But they really don't like you to do that though, because the whole kind of concept, or I guess, around it is that they want you to be able to pick and choose what's important to you. So that's different for everybody. And so what you can do is you can kind of, what they want you to do is they want you to suggest kind of like, if I was a student, here's the default stuff that we want a student to see. And then a student can decide whether or not they think that that content is useful to them or not. And if they don't care to see that content, they just untag it, or they drag it, they drag it down somewhere where it's still there, but it's not kind of in their primary. It's below the scroll bar,
Sure.
kind of stuff, but it's still there. Or they just get rid of it altogether. If I'm not interested in, this ARM system, I'm not a student athlete. I don't care to see it. I just untag it and it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the idea. And so like the default view the student gets is pretty minimal for us. I mean, I think it's a handful or less of defaulted cards. It's going to be things like degree works and um, their email and maybe their class schedule, um, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then they can go discover other things if they are interested in those other things, right? There's a button at the bottom that says discover more, and they can go out and search the catalog for other things that have been secured to say these are student cards. They don't see cards that are meant for faculty or staff. They only see things that have been assigned the student role.
So if I may ask, is like, so is the student interface, it will be like customization interface or in between a standard interface and the customization?
Say that again.
Okay. So
Catch all of it.
okay, you mentioned like the student can remove or untag the card they don't want or they don't like, but it's like they want you will put for them as like something they have to see. So what I'm saying, so the interface I'm saying is the interface is like kind of customization interface or like impose customization and the standard interface for a student. So the student wants to get sign in by his IDs, like find something standard and he can customize what he need else, or
yeah. So if I was the administrator of this and I knew that there were 10 cards in this catalog that were something that we thought was important enough that we wanted to default it, that's what this homepage button is here.
okay.
So if you flip this on, you're basically saying whoever has access to see this, the first time they log in, the first time you log into Experience for the first time, you get kind of like a little tutorial that kind of shows you how to use the system, like how to look for new things and how to move things around. You get this little tutorial that shows up only the first time you've ever been in the system. And then when you actually click through the tutorial and you get into your homepage here, everything that you see by default the first time is those things that are turned on that say, I want this on the homepage. So the first time it shows up, you get the default homepage. And then from there, you can drag things around, you can untag the stuff you don't want, and then it'll remember that you said you don't want those things. And so you design, every student, every faculty, every staff that logs in gets to determine what their what they're interested in and where they place it, and it remembers all of that.
Yeah, very nice. Interesting.
Ken, this is Jesse, and I think from what you said before, the only exception to that is the custom cards, and you disable that.
You can
ability.
disable it. They don't like you to do it,
Right.
but you can actually say don't allow them, because we've had instances where we've thought like something might be important enough that we don't want people to ever remove it, you know, like trying to think of an example of that. Like right now, I think maybe like placement tests for new freshmen, maybe one of those things where it's like we don't want a new freshman to accidentally, you know, remove that and then not realize that there was something that they needed to do because they don't see the thing anymore. So
if you untag it, you will still see that card with B. Like if you get down a little bit of the screen, yeah, like yeah, this one, the third one, it's like the parking permit. You already untagged, so they will see that as it is, or they will not see it.
No, it's gone.
Okay.
And so the way, if I hard refresh this and I came back in, what I would have to do to get it back is either come up here to the hamburger menu, go to discover, type back in, you know, parking, Edinburgh parking permit. Now it's untagged for me. I can add it back, and then it comes back in. It always comes back in the 0 position, and then you have to drag it somewhere. So if I wanted it back down here, I'd stick it back down here.
Thank you.
Ken, I was curious about the search terms for that. So parking, obviously, you'll probably yield a parking result, but if you had something like placement testing and maybe they didn't have the word placement, like what does it search on?
So you get to configure, you know, whoever's your administrator of this environment gets to configure that. So if I went to placement tests and I go to configure right here.
Okay,
so
awesome.
It's just a comma separated list of tags.
Great.
And then those tags are what show up in the discover more. They show up across the top here. So you could conceivably, you know, you could search through these and say, oh, I'm interested in Data Connect, and it would show you everything in the catalog that was tagged with those keywords. Or permit, you know, or you could search. But yeah, that's how that works. You get to configure, you know, what the title is. It shows up across the title bar, and then, you know, some of that other. We'll go back and look at one of these. Yeah, the description, the title, tags. These drive the way the cards look like in the mobile app. You know, if you're actually using the actual mobile app part of Experience, it drives kind of if you shrunk this down to, oops, what did I do? I think I closed it. Hold on. If you shrunk this down to mobile app size, it would drive kind of, you know, once it gets down to this size, you don't see content anymore. It's too small. So all you see is kind of one of these little guys. And then you have to, if I was actually on, see, like this is how it would work on your phone. You click on the tile and then it actually opens the app kind of like this. That one's not going to work because I'm not on the VPN. Yeah, it kind of pops over. This is what it would look like if you're on your phone. And so that controls kind of that, you know, what does it look like when you're on your phone or when you're on the actual like thick, you know, Experience has an actual thick client mobile app too. But yeah, so just a couple of, you know, configuration options. You can also have, you can categorize the cards, and you can configure what categories they have. It's kind of not super great right now because you can only have these 5 categories, and you can't have a sixth. So you have to kind of put everything in one of these 5 buckets, but you can control kind of what the buckets are called. And then that really just governs things like if I was looking over here, I would see the different categories and I could click on them and it would show me everything that related to academics.
Oh, great. Yeah, I think I remember the very first time I saw Experience, I didn't see a way to simulate pages, but I think I remember seeing this in a recent demo. So on our portal, we have 5 pages. So you could sort of use that to simulate in the navigation menu 5 different pages. Is that right?
Yeah. It would just be like it's a quick way of filtering just by category, like putting things in a category and filtering by that category. And then you can have 2 external links. Those kind of show up over here. If you had them configured and you clicked on one of these, you would see 2 external links as one of the options here as well. We don't typically use those. And then you can kind of, as an administrator, you can configure, your social media URLs down here. You can have, I think, up to 5 globally scoped URLs that kind of show up in here. We don't use that for anything, but that's configurable. That's configurable as well. You can have you can import a calendar. We don't do that yet, but the idea would be like if you wanted to import like an academic calendar, you could put an academic calendar up here. And if somebody clicked on it, you would see kind of all the important dates from that calendar. I think, you can have up to 5 calendars. And then these are configured by role too. So you can assign, different calendars to different roles. And
do you use Microsoft Exchange and Outlook for your email client at PennWest?
Yeah.
And is there much integration between Experience and your Office applications? So, for example, OneDrive. Do you have OneDrive integrated, and Teams? Do you have the inbox displaying for the students or not?
Yeah. So this is the inbox, and this is federated. Like it's just an OAuth out to the Microsoft Graph API to grab this. I have OneDrive down here too.
Nice.
And then so it's pulling my files from OneDrive. Got the email. I'm actually working on building. There's not a delivered integration beyond that, and this is really not even delivered. Ellucian developed this, and it's out on their GitHub site. You have to go basically download it and install it in your environment yourself. It's not a supported integration, but they built it as an example. So basically, it's use at your own risk. If there's a bug in it, you're on the hook to fix the bug. It's not a managed application, but it is out there. You can use it. It's the OneDrive one is the same. And then, I'm working on building a Teams version of that right now. So with the idea being that it really does the same thing. It does an OAuth connection to the Graph API using my identity. And then it would basically pull in my Teams information. What teams do I belong to? Do I have scheduled Teams meetings? Maybe even the ability to launch a Teams meeting right from that card. That kind of stuff, the stuff that you would normally get in, Teams or in Zoom, on the homepage of Zoom or in Teams, kind of what's today's date and what meetings do I have today, and that kind of stuff. Maybe even notifications from, you could have notifications from, chats that you missed, or anything you really can pull from those APIs. You can surface out there. So we've had a number of requests from faculty saying, hey, I changed computers a lot. I'm moving to different campuses, whatever, and I can never remember how to sign into Teams, and I'm at the different places. And so can I just have a card that has Teams on it, and I can launch the Teams app from that card, and it's already single sign-on because Teams is already single sign-on, and I'm already single signed in to the Experience app. So it would just be seamless if I could just have that card. I can click on it and it's going to launch the app and sign me in. And it's like, yeah, we can do that. And then I'm adding some of the other bells and whistles, like going out and pulling, some other meaningful information from Teams for them. And we're looking at possibly building a Zoom version of that as well. I just started this morning building one for Brightspace, so that we'll have a D2L card that actually does OAuth to the D2L APIs and pulls out, for a student, that pulls out the courses they're enrolled in, notifications that they get from those courses, and all the things that you would get out of D2L, or things that the students are used to getting out of, like the Pulse app, if you're familiar with that. Being able to surface that same kind of student-centric information right within the portal itself. And so what you would get then is, instead of just what we have now is, students have a card called Student Quick Access, and right on there it has a Brightspace link, and if they click on it, it single signs them into Brightspace. Instead of just having that, there would actually be a whole card dedicated to D2L or to Brightspace, which would have, notifications that you got, that assignments are due, or whatever, all the things that you have and students are used to getting, like on the Thick Client app. We could also surface that same information here.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, so where are we? I didn't get off topic too much, but
no, this is great. Could you show us a faculty view? I know it's going to be similar but different content, and the reason is I'm going to be putting together a deck soon that's going to show faculty, hey, this is what you see today, but here's an example of what it could look like tomorrow. So that might be interesting to look at, the faculty view. And if that's up to stage or you don't have it, that's okay.
I don't know that I have a faculty member that I can log in as.
Yeah. Okay.
But their default view is pretty basic. They get email by default. They get the faculty quick links by default. So there's a quick links for all those major groups. So staff have their own list of curated single sign-on links. The faculty have their own. So faculty would have this, and they have the student directory. So if I wanted to search for a student, the things that they typically use are like email, the student directory, this guy, and then they have things like Starfish, because they log into Starfish a lot. I think everybody gets things like the weather app and the Twitter feed if they want it. They get OneDrive. And that's about it. I mean, they don't need a whole lot, so they don't typically get a whole lot.
Right. Well, that's good. Let me bump
banner. I guess they get this banner one. If I was on campus, I would get the banner search, which is basically like the app nav replacement for interfacing with banner directly without going to app nav.
That makes sense. Great. Let me, I'm going to share my screen real quick.
Sure.
It'll bump you off. And let's see. Also was interested in, and that was very helpful to see that live. These are the other things I had. Can you think of a few things? So where we are in the process is that we're a couple weeks away from having our first kickoff meeting with our consultant. So we'll be starting our implementation soon. And our plan is to get through the Ellucian engagement between end of March and around June or July. And then we'll use the rest of the year or the year to follow to really customize and configure it and build out a lot of the content. So given that we're about to launch, what are maybe a few things that you would do differently in terms of lessons learned if you were to start your own Ellucian Experience implementation over again?
I mean, ours was a bit unique in that we were forced to go into one tenant and then migrate to another one mid go. So it's a bit different. I think the big couple of things that you can do up front and maybe we would think about differently is there is quite a bit of technical ramp up for this. A lot of schools, I've been talking to a lot of schools, and there's really two avenues you can go. You could build, and some schools do, you could build a lot of static content using the tools that are given. So you can create static lists of links and some of that stuff that's delivered out of the box and is kind of WYSIWYG. You just fill in some forms and hit next, finish, and you have a card. Or you could, some of those cards you can, embed content from other places or just have static markup in, if you wanted to do that, but if you want to do anything outside of that, then someone on your team needs to have experience with, RESTful APIs and particularly, JavaScript and JSON objects and React or just JavaScript in general, but it would help if it was React. That's going to be the hardest part. That's going to be the biggest barrier to you getting off the ground and being able to actually build content that's dynamic. It's going and pulling actual student information from Banner or from Brightspace or from Teams, all those things that you're going to need to do, you have to build all that yourself. So, whatever you need to do to develop that kind of skill set in your team, will ultimately become critical, because what'll happen is you'll go through the engagement with Ellucian. They'll help you set up the environment and do the single sign-on and get everybody in there. And then they just kind of, they expect it. You're just going to go in and build this stuff yourself. And if eventually you'll get to a point where they'll schedule training for your team, and it's a 3-day training, and they'll say, we're going to train you on the Ellucian SDK for this stuff. And what they mean by that is really they're going to train you on the Ellucian SDK. So they're going to expect that you already know how to make RESTful API calls and how to build React apps. And, that's kind of like prerequisite knowledge to them. And so they don't touch on any of that. And so a lot of folks go into that training and then come out upset because they didn't learn anything. And it's like, well, you didn't learn anything because there was prerequisite knowledge expected, and most teams don't have that. So build that early. I told Jeff, I would talk to Jeff, pretty regularly. I told Jeff, I'm like, Jeff, people need to plan a bit for this. Go buy a book, go read a book. You're going to have to. You're going to get a lot more out of this if somebody comes into this engagement already having some of that prerequisite knowledge.
That makes sense. Anything else stick out in your mind that a big pitfall that if you would have focused on earlier could have saved you some headache?
Planning, I guess, in terms of the hardest part of this is not hardest part, but a big part of this is, planning your whatever you're going to use to govern permissions. So things like, we sort of been building some of this as we go, but if you could plan ahead a bit and think about like, what are the different cohorts of security that we're going to need, or we think we might need, and then how are you going to implement those things? We've chose to pass through the roles as claims from Active Directory, but there's other things that you could do too. You could configure some gory role settings in Banner and pass those through. So start thinking about, like, it's definitely role based permissions. So think about like what are the types of roles that we're going to need to secure content by, and then make sure that the technical team, whoever manages your single sign-on, whoever manages your Active Directory, or whoever manages the gory role setup in Banner, is planning for a way to facilitate those type of group security.
Yeah, that's good.
Trying to think of kind of some other stuff, but I mean, it's really not overly difficult to set up. Like I said, like the Ellucian folks they'll walk you right through all the configuration to set it up and get in. It's really the things that you're going to need to do that's institutional specific that is going to be the sticky part.
Right. And then can you think of a couple things that you think went well during your implementation? What were the sort of like the keys to success for your implementation that you could think of?
I think probably the big thing for me is really around just trying to market. So you can even start early. You guys have a a portal today that you're going to have to kind of port some of that content over. So being able to start auditing, what do you think you need early, engaging with the different functional areas that maybe own that content, and have a discussion with them. Is that something you're interested in porting over or not? Trying to get like a back catalog of what are the types of things that you're going to need to build content for. And then, outreach has been a big thing for us. And we've been, almost like a sales person. We've been going out to the different functional areas around campus and really selling to them. If you don't have content on the portal, here's the types of things that you could do, that we could do for you. You can work with marketing on if you wish. If you want to have, dynamic content like integrations to, vendor apps and stuff like we were talking about with Brightspace. Like if you want to have those things, like, we can facilitate that stuff. We just need your help kind of, figuring out what do you need from a content perspective. And so we've been, I think, fairly successful because we've been doing so much outreach. We not as much waiting for folks to come to us as we are actually aggressively pursuing those areas and saying, look, you don't have anything out here. Is there something that we can get out here for you? Something that you're interested in? And a lot of areas have shown interest. The hard part for us, and you've probably noticed this as well, is like some of them will say, yeah, we want content, and we'll say, okay, cool. We'd be happy to facilitate. What kind of content are you thinking about? And then it's just like deer in headlights. Like they don't know what they want. And I struggle because it's like, I don't know everything about your business. What would be meaningful for you? You kind of need to help us understand that stuff, and we can build something for you. That's been tough.
Yep. Yep, that makes sense. Let's see, a few technical questions. Now, Jesse, do you want to ask your question about CSS and styling? I think you have a little bit better idea what you were looking for.
Yeah, Ken. So from my limited understanding, it seems like there's a limited amount that you can do with it? Is it pretty much you've got these cards and you can apply some branding type things, colors and things like that, or sort of where does the scope of branding end on those?
Okay, yeah, I can show real quick. So let me share real quick again.
Yep.
So from a styling perspective, yeah, from a I guess from a theming perspective, you know, you can't do a whole lot. If I go back to configuration, I have this theming option. I can basically pick primary and secondary colors. I can provide a URL to a logo, which is this thing. You know, do I want a background image or a background color? That kind of stuff. And that's in the name of the app that shows up here in the favicon. And that's about it from a theming perspective of the tenant itself. From the card perspective, you have, you know, you can do kind of whatever you want. I guess with the caveat that you really kind of want to stay. I guess maybe I shouldn't say you really kind of want to, but I've chosen to stay within, for the most part, within the bounds of what the path design system that Ellucian provides allows you to do. Because then you have that you manage that consistent look and feel. I don't know if you guys know what path design is yet, but effectively, the React SDK, basically a huge portion of it is basically Ellucian has built an entire library of pre-built components that you can kind of use like Legos to build out your components with. And I'll talk more about that at eLive if you're interested, how that works. But essentially, so they'll deliver things like here, this button here is a button that I didn't develop. This was something that Ellucian provided. It's a component that I can use in my code, and it's a standard definition of what a button is. And then if I use that button everywhere else, where else do I have it? You know, I get the same implementation of button. But this one's red and white, and this one's blue, you know, so, and this one's red and white. And, you know, so what I've done is I've actually gone in, and I'm still using button, but I've actually added some, I can show you that's kind of what that looks like, but I've actually been able, I can inject my own code right into my component that just has a higher specificity than the default CSS that you get from their component. And then I can change its behavior, you know, and some, like in this case, I changed the button color. There's no red and white button in what Ellucian provides you, but I've just, for this specific card, I've wrote some CSS to just, you know, basically have a higher specificity and go out and actually, you know, change the color to red instead of, you know, right here. I just used important to change the specificity.
So is that like targeting a class, right, and catching the code? There's a targeting that class. Is that like code that's tied to that? What is it, card?
Yeah, it's code tied to, let me see if I can find one real quick.
I guess my real question is, can you have like a subset of those different sort of Lego bricks that you talked about? Like you have a button, but then can you have your own set of buttons, or are you kind of customizing those on the fly?
I mean, there's nothing that says that you can't create your own button. You could. The difference there is that, you know, if you go out and you build your own thing, and then Ellucian changes something that now collides with the change you've made, now you might have some really funny behavior in your cards.
Right. So if you wanted a custom button, you basically have to duplicate theirs.
Yeah, you want to inherit from theirs, and you can do that. So like, for instance, like, I don't know if you can see this, but button is you know, typography and button and divider and alert. These are all components that are already pre-built, and they come in this module from Ellucian. And then you can inherit them into your you can load them into import them into your project and then use them. But you can also kind of, if you went out to the documentation for these objects, all of these objects have properties that you can pass into them when you instantiate them to manipulate their behavior. So, if I had had different types of alerts, I could pass in properties to that to change the behavior of an alert. So maybe an alert's a good message and I want it to be green and have a smiley face on it. That's one version of the alert that's purposely built for that. But if I pass in another parameter, I can say I want it to be a bad message. So that message shows up in red and it has a triangle with an exclamation point in it, that kind of thing. You can kind of control that based on the properties that you can pass into these objects. But then say you weren't happy with any of that and you just wanted to build your own alert. There's nothing that stops you from doing this. There's no magic in what they're doing. What Ellucian, the SDK really is a collection of libraries. It's these things. It's a collection of libraries that you use inside of a React app. Nothing special about it. This is just a React app, and so you can do whatever you want. If you're not happy with the button that Ellucian provided, you could go code up your own button and put it in a module and import that module into every project that uses button, and you would have an IUP button that everybody would use, and it would have a standard definition and it would be maintained in one place and all the things that you want. But you're on the hook to maintain it, and you're on the hook to, if that button, if Ellucian makes an update and now all of a sudden that button is overflowing the bounds of a card, that's something you're going to have to go fix. But you can certainly do that. The other thing you can do is you can inherit, like I chose to do. I can inherit their button that doesn't have a color of red. And I can pass into this component, I can have an object that is, this looks like CSS, right? It's not quite CSS, but it looks like CSS. It behaves like CSS, where I can actually, pass in kind of like inline styles. This is basically the same thing as a style class in CSS. So I can say my card, anything that has, card assigned to it. I don't know if I'm actually using this or not in the code. Yeah, right here. So I have a div, and the div has a class assigned to this card object. And so that entire div behaves like I assigned a CSS class to it, because when this code actually gets transpiled to JavaScript and then ultimately to HTML, it is a CSS class that is getting passed. So anything that you can kind of do in CSS, you can also do in these React cards, like inline styling, or in this case, I'm creating an object with a class called card in it. But you can also do inline styling too. So if I was down here, if I was back in this div or in a button, I could pass another parameter that says style equal, and I could pass in inline styling just like I would in HTML. And when it gets generated, it basically generates an inline style, just like you would in any other HTML app. So you can control it that way. This alert here is kind of what I was talking about with the props that you can pass to this class. This is a component that Ellucian built, and so you can pass props to it, which are basically properties. They're basically like, you think of these like they're instantiation parameters. Like if you're building a new class, you can pass parameters in that govern the behavior of that object that you're building. So in this case, I'm passing in an alert type of warning. If I wanted to pass in an alert type of success, that would change the behavior of the rendering of the alert object. Like in this case too, you're passing in a parameter that says, do I want this to be dismissible or not? Do I want it to have an X in the corner where they can say, I don't care about this error? or do I want it to be sticky and stay up there forever? That kind of thing.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
No, Eric, you're on mute there. Not sure if you heard me or not.
Still on mute.
Eric, we cannot hear you.
I think he's trying to find his control panel.
Oh,
Sorry about that. Okay, I am back. Okay, so I'm going to reshare my screen here, and okay, so in the interest of time, I was going to skip over this. I know. Thanks, Ken, for mentioning you're going to lead a PennWest experience. I'll make sure that's added to my agenda for eLive. And I'm leading a PA bug session. Ronnie's the secondary presenter. I'm the primary for the PA bug session. So that you could add to your session if you wanted. When we were talking, what popped into my head was the concept of roles and dynamic groups in Luminous. Out of the experience demos that I've seen, the big delta between what we built in our university portal now and what experience can deliver is the concept of targeted content portlets. So I wanted to show you how we have it set up, because I have not seen, with the experience demos I've seen so far, a compatible workaround that doesn't involve either changes in the way the information architecture is presented or some dual maintenance. So
Okay.
Here's our portal, and I'll give you a quick example. So here's our academics page. So if you go down to library, you can see here's some content we have coming in for the library. But the way we have it is each one of these portlets or widgets behind the scenes has different content coming in based on role. And so from an admin side, it sort of looks like this. So, and we have many of these. We have over 100, probably 150 targeted content portlets. So you can see if you're a library, you'll get different content if you're a grad student versus faculty. And then we can be very granular about what comes in. And what's kind of nice is in Banner, we have a limited number of roles coming over from Banner, but what I'm able to do is I'm able to go in and define for myself what exactly these dynamic groups are now, which is nice. So I haven't seen an equivalent in experience. The only way that I see to do it is to, for example, if I want to do the same, I would have to create four different library portlets, each targeted to that individual role. And I would have to define that on the Banner side because experience doesn't have one of those expression builders in it. Do you think that's true, or do you know a better way to do that?
No, so you can drive dynamic content, not in the tool itself, like you're going to be able, like you were doing back there, where you can go in and you can say, I'm gonna dynamically group these two groups and it's now a new group that's kind of dynamically built based on like a conglomerate of other groups, and you can't. But what you can do is say your team was building a library card.
Mm-hmm.
This happens for us all the time because now we have 3 campuses and for instance, like we all have different meal plans, meal vendors. I mean, so we want to show content based on role, based on what campus you're associated with. And so that's why when I was showing those roles, we have I'm a student at Cal, I'm a student at Clarion, I'm a student online, I'm a student at Edinburgh. Because if you need to show different content based on those different student groups. So how do you do that though? There's no way within the tool to just say this card shows this content if you have to build that into the card itself. And so when you look at, you know, I can show you real quick, because I, just for debugging purposes, I actually print this out all the time. Refresh this. What you get out of Experience is the roles that came through the IDP. So all these ones that begin with AG dash, these are roles that came through the single sign-on claims. So these ones came through the single sign-on claims. These other roles that I have assigned to me, student, instructor, these came from banner gory role. And so this is exposed to your custom cards. If you build them using React, this is exposed through a defined, you know, hook that they have purpose built for this. So you can call, kind of like, think of it like a function. You can call a function that'll tell you what are the roles of the current logged in user. And so you'll get back this array of roles. And then you can actually build you can build dynamic, you know, show and hide rules inside of your content, inside of your card, that say, if you are a student, this is the content you see. And if you're faculty, this is the content you see.
Great. That's perfect. Yep, that's the one question I haven't been able to get answered. So that answers that. Just requires that custom development.
Yeah, it does. That's the only way I can see to get around that. Also, you know, I for 90% of what we do, I choose, even if it's something that could be developed with, you know, static markup. I could go out to, say, you know, configuration and say add a new card, and you have all these kind of card options that you can use by default, right? You can, you know, embed a URL, which is basically like I could iframe, or I could create an HTML card where I just get an editor that says paste some HTML in here, and you could certainly do that too. I've chose not to use these except for like the embeds I use for like the quick links cards I use. Obviously, they're just you know, add some links and they show up, and you know, we saw some of those earlier. I choose not to use too much of that. I have, you know, this is markup. The weather is markup from an embedded, you know, weather channel app. The Twitter feed's an embed from Twitter. And we have some of these quick links cards that are just lists of SSO links.
Mm-hmm.
Those are built in, you know, out of the box. You just WYSIWYG set them up. The rest of these cards, even the simple ones that could easily be static markup, like the student success card for Starfish, you could have built, I mean, there's nothing to this. It's a background image and some text and 2 buttons. You could have built this in static HTML and pasted it in, and it would be fine. I chose not to do that because, one, I want to use the path design system, and 2, because if I ever needed to have that dynamic content, there's no way to do that from a static markup card. You know, if it's a React app, I can go in and modify that app today to just, you know, maybe like in this case, this does happen. If I'm a student and I see the Starfish app, I only see the sign in the Starfish button. I don't see the workshop registration button. That's for faculty and staff. And so this is dynamically hidden unless you have the role faculty and staff. Students only see 1 button, faculty and staff see 2. That's just an example of that, but you can use that kind of all over the place. And then we have situations where maybe you have multiple campus affinities. In our case, like maybe I'm a new student and I'm admitted to Clarion and California. In those cases, we use those roles the same way. In our card, we see, oh, so-and-so has an affinity to both places. Now, instead of seeing the content, they see a campus selector screen first that says, which campus do you want to see content for? You have an association with both.
Mhm.
And they click on, you know, the Clarion icon, they see the Clarion information. If they click on the Cal icon, they see the Cal information.
Yep. That's great. Okay, well, thanks so much. I'm going to stop the